My name is Carl O'Keefe and I'm Secretary for the Electrical Electronic Division. Apologies, Greg sends on his apologies there. The chairman, he's in Bahrain, so he couldn't attend tonight, so I've stepped in. Some formalities, if you can turn off the phones there, just as a respect for the speaker. And I'm not aware of any fire alarm, so I think the emergency exit is over there. So if the alarm goes off, we'll coordinate ourselves and move towards the exit. I think how the talk is going to be for about approximately 40 minutes, and we'll do a Q&A session then after that. And if you've any questions, maybe to keep them to the end, that'd be good. Just a little bit about the event. So Martin Jones of JT Limited, our speaker, will discuss the development of competency after the Piper Alpha disaster in 1988 and how major users assisted the development moving on the methodology of validating core competency and why it is important for employers to maintain a safe workplace to protect staff, contracting staff, and the capital asset. The importance of utilising an accredited scheme will be stressed to ensure variability is reduced to the minimum, as well as an overview of where the CompEx scheme currently addresses competency and its strategy moving forward. And a little bit about our speaker, Martin Jones. Thank you for attending and coming to this event tonight. Martin Jones is the CompEx Operations Manager of the Internationally Accredited CompEx Scheme, which validates core competency for responsible persons, application design engineers and operative technicians who work in explosive atmospheres. Martin has worked in heavy industry most of his working life, 20 years in British Coal Corporation, from a craft student apprentice to electrical engineer, then general manager, production director at Europe's largest board panel producer. Studying an MBA whilst working at Marlin Industries, he left to take up Operations Directorship at NWP in commercial electrical and mechanical contracting, which led to his current role. He joined JTL, the UK's largest work-based learning provider, and the CompEx Certification Body in 2006, and took up the CompEx Scheme responsibilities in 2007, where he has grown the CompEx Scheme from 11 to 51 centres worldwide, and in 2010 achieved ISO IEC accreditation for the scheme, with the UK United Kingdom Accreditation Service. So welcome tonight, Martin.
Thank you.
And this is a webcast event, and will be available following the talk as well. The slides will be available. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Firstly, could I just say thank you to Engineers Ireland for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you this evening. And for all those out on the webcast, the PDF slides will be available. So I hope you enjoy the talk. And I look forward to some questions at the end. So the CompEx Competency Scheme, a lot of people say to me, what is the CompEx Scheme? CompEx was developed as it was introduced after the Piper Alpha explosion in 1988, where 167 men perished. And industry said this cannot happen again. So the whole philosophy behind CompEx is to ensure safer working in explosive atmospheres through a proven approach to competency, development and certification. So I'm going to take you through what CompEx is, the operation, the ownership and the delivery, which sometimes is quite confusing for people. We touched on the accreditation and how important that is to the CompEx Certification Body. The reasons we do it is for asset protection, as well as making it a safe workplace for the workers. The modules we have, the requirements and the numbers that we've had throughout the scheme's life. And moving forward, we've just introduced a new EX14 responsible person module, so I'll give you an overview of that and where we operate within the world. So firstly, CompEx is an international scheme now based on IEC 679 standards for the International Electrotechnical Certification Scheme, and the standards that we focus on is parts 14 for installation and 17 for inspection, to recognise core competency. So COMP is the first reference we get for safe working in explosive atmospheres. So CompEx is working in explosive atmospheres, which I'm probably sure you're well aware. over the 21 years that CompEx has been a scheme, we started off with one centre in Aberdeen in 1994, but since then, certainly the growth in the last 6 years, we now have certificated over 60,000 core competency certificates across the range of modules since 1994. I mentioned the Piper Alpha North Sea disaster. Industry got together after Lord Cullen's report, which reported 106 safety recommendations resulting from the Piper Alpha disaster inquiry. And that inquiry took 2 years. And the anniversary of the disaster 2 years later was when this report came out. And it took industry 4 years to come up with a solution for how to address competency, because it had already been introduced in the electricity at work regulations for the requirement for workers to be competent. So now that this was a legal requirement, this left industry with a problem. Well, how do we actually measure competency? At the time, the captains of industry brought together by EMUA, which is the Engineering, Equipment, Material and Users Association. They were heavily involved in bringing everybody together to develop the CompEx scheme. At that time, we had Shell, British Gas, BP, Esso and the regulator that came together to develop the scheme between 1990 and 1993. They formed a CompEx scheme committee, and that is still very much the most important part of what we do. So it gives independence to the CompEx scheme committee, to the CompEx scheme certification body, I should say, to ensure we have industry stakeholder representation through the regulator, most importantly. And that's one of the reasons why we've just developed the EX14 module. Oil and Gas UK, that used to be known as UKOA, which is the Oil and Gas Offshore Operator Body. The EMUA user members from the major oil and gas companies. And we have international centre representatives on our scheme committee now, because we now have over 27 international centres throughout the world. So it's important we have representation from our international centres too. The Association of Petroleum and Explosive Atmospheres, representation because our fuel module 7 and 8, they provide us with the Blue Book, the 3rd edition of the Blue Book, which helps with the standards associated to storage, transportation and dispensation of fuels. And to represent the employers, the Electrical Contractors Association were involved in the very beginning, and with Unite as representing the workers. Together, they developed the company JTL in 1989. And it was when these industry captains got together and they decided that they needed a methodology to assess competency, is when JTL got involved. JTL is the work-based learning arm for the ECA and Unite, and have provided multiple thousands of apprentices into craftsmen electricians in England and Wales throughout the last 20 years, 25 years. JT Limited was the original company. JT Limited is this CompEx certification body and now the scheme owner. We took ownership off EMUA back in April 2014, where the scheme had grown. It had been operated and managed by JT Limited for 20 years, and it was seen as a strategic shift for EMUA to hand over the scheme to JT Limited, while still retaining a key stakeholder part in what we do. So we exclusively operate the CompEx scheme through licensed centres worldwide, and perhaps the most important work that I've done in my career with CompEx is managing the accreditation from 2007 to 2010 and getting 17024 accreditation, which is conformity assessment for certification bodies providing certification of persons. And what that means is, from a quality management point of view, is that we meet the requirements of an international standard to certify people's competency. To give you a flavour of the type and size of companies that are part of EMUA's membership, you can see from there are some very big hitting oil and gas companies and chemical companies throughout their association. So the scheme is developed by the users, for the users, or we operate it on behalf of the users to make sure that they have the right competencies in place, so their legal requirements as employers are met by the scheme. As our technical content, as I mentioned, the IEC 679 parts 14 and 17 are referenced in the EMUA publication 186, and this is a practitioner's handbook which has got various chapters in against the different CompEx modules that have been developed. All CompEx instructors and assessors are certified and registered with the CompEx Certification Body. Not only do they have to be qualified electrotechnical craftspeople as a minimum, they also have to possess a valid CompEx certificate, and they also have to pass a professional interview with the CompEx chairman and myself or my colleague in order for them to come on our register to be certified to deliver instruction or deliver assessment of CompEx candidates. All CompEx centres are approved and licensed by ourselves, the certification body, and we visit each centre annually to ensure that the centre is operating against our rules, to ensure our accreditation is looked after and is in place. So with 51 centres now, we've finally taken over the number of centres we have in the UK, which previously always dominated our international flavour. Back in 2007, when I picked up the responsibility for the scheme, we had 8 UK centres and 3 international satellite centres who operated out of the UK centres, one in Qatar, one in Azerbaijan and one in Singapore. I'll touch later where our geographical world map has spread us to now. So the CompEx Certification Body is accredited, and the relationship between the two is such that UKAS under the IAF, who are accredited to certify bodies for certification of persons, they took apart our scheme for 3 years and looked at all the processes that we had and checked that they were in line with the processes and procedures required by the guidance notes for 17024. At that time, it was the 2003 accreditation, and we have since been through the 2012 accreditation 2 years ago, now that the UKAS body is in a position to certify against that standard. So we've kept up with the latest standard of 17024, and that sets us aside from many certification bodies throughout the world by having this accreditation. And that is the proof of our accreditation. That's the top of the our schedule of accreditation, which can be viewed on the UKAS website, and it does list the countries where our accreditation exists at the last revision, which was March 2015. We have a few to add to this year's accreditation visit with our UKAS assessor. This is the publication 186, the Practitioner's Handbook, which is currently going through its 7th revision, which will be to the 2014 version of the IEC 679 standards. This publication retails at €130 direct from EMUA, and is a very comprehensive practical handbook on how to interpret the international standards in terms of a practitioner for the workplace. There's a white toolbox guide which slips in your pocket or in your toolbox, which is given to every candidate that comes on the course, and that can be purchased separately from JT Limited at a nominal cost of €20, and that has all the inspection tables in it to guide the operator technician to be able to conduct their inspections correctly, as well as all the high-level requirements for safety with regards to installations. I talked about asset protection, and it's all very well spending millions of pounds, dollars, euros on high-cost capital installation, but if we don't look after that asset properly, then not only is the asset at risk, but so are the people that work in that workplace. So there are international standards that create an international conformity for installation and inspection, but the ATEX directives in Europe give us a legal framework, and in the UK the dangerous substances and explosive atmospheres fall out of the ATEX directives, and I'm sure you have a similar set of regulations here in Ireland to cover yourselves for that ATEX directive as well. And in the US we have the National Electrical Code, which is their legal mechanism for installations of electrical equipment in hazardous areas, and that's between codes 500 and 505. Equipment design is approved by certification bodies, so as standards are developed, we have the opportunity over an 18-month, 2-year period to consult, discuss, agree, disagree with the standard setting, and that is down to us whether we engage or not. Taking that a step further, equipment design is normally placed in the reliable hands of the approved certification bodies under the IECEX scheme, and that's always pretty well been a safe haven to ensure that the equipment is of the right standard and has been tested thoroughly to withstand the aggressive atmospheres that exist in explosive atmosphere sites. The next step in the safety chain is the application design engineers and then the practitioners, and their competency validation and certification within the CompEx scheme again helps protect the asset. If we have all these things working well together, then the asset is pretty much protected. We're putting in place a number of obstacles to prevent any potential ignition or disaster. And by way of developing that, we have put together what we call a global solution for the competency route to safety in terms of a safety linkage diagram, where CompEx validates the competency of people designing, installing, maintaining and managing workplaces where dangerous explosive atmospheres may be present. So I mentioned the opportunity to be involved in the setting of the regulations and to take part with international standards committees. That's pretty high level. It's normally with engineers from major users, from manufacturers, and also from product certification bodies. So there should be a good input from all stakeholders to ensure the standards are correct. So the next part of the safety chain is to ensure that the products are tested and certificated correctly, and pretty much that has usually been very much a safe haven if it has an approved certificate with the associated documentation to allow its installation to be done correctly. The professional side of the engineers, who most people are graduates and have come up through the ranks and become specialists at the design and management systems. That's very much for hazard analysis, system engineering, and the responsible people that are involved at that point in time. When Piper Alpha happened, these three categories were pretty much sound. What was found to be the biggest element and risk was the operator technician element that provided the installation, the inspection and the maintenance and repair, and that was seen as the weak link in the chain, and that's why the CompEx scheme was developed, to strengthen that link and make that a secure area. So with the CompEx certification of personnel, with all those links working well, we've enhanced safety across the life cycle of the asset. And what that does for the technical manager and the user's duty of care, it allows him to sleep at night, knowing that he's got people who are competent looking after the asset. What that actually did as well, the CompEx personnel took on a new level of confidence and sometimes challenged the hookup drawings that were coming from the application design engineers. And that's what led us to develop a application design engineer module, EX12, was to assist the application design engineers understand their duties, but also to give them a competency certificate so that they have also got something to reference that they are competent to do their job. The modules that we deliver, the only knowledge element that we deliver is CompEx EXF, which is a 2-day foundation module which anybody could attend without any entry criteria, and that is finalised with one written examination just to test the knowledge picked up on the course. And it's not high level, but it does give people a background understanding of what electrical protection concepts are in place, why we have zones in explosive atmospheres, and the philosophy behind protecting electrical equipment in explosive atmospheres. 80% of what we do in CompEx are the next 4 modules, which is EX1 to EX4. That's the preparation and installation and inspection and maintenance of both EX and intrinsically safe equipment. Having worked in the mining industry, the hazards of dust are very clear to myself, but not everybody understands that a secondary explosion which involves dust can be the most devastating explosion that can happen. And if you look at the Imperial Sugar Factory in Texas in the US, and the Bosley factory in Macclesfield in last summer, even in 2015, dust is still a very, very big hazard. So if you have a flame front that lifts up carbonized dust, a secondary explosion coming along with a thirst for oxygen and fuel, that can create one of the biggest problems. And that is still a very much a growing module as people are starting to understand that it's not just hydrocarbons that are the big hazard. Dust is a bigger hazard if it's involved as a secondary explosion. We developed the fuel filling modules, as I mentioned earlier, in conjunction with APEA, and that is for we've done about 700 or 800 practitioners on that module, but some of the enforcement agencies accept EX1 to 4 as being sufficient, and that's a decision that rests with them. I think their decision based on whether there is a competency certification in place, whether it's specialised to fuel filling or not. But there are some unique circumstances with fuel filling at a fuel station that do need to be understood for people working in that environment. The water industry, in the mid-80s, there was the Aberford pumping disaster where the pumping area had industrial equipment, and it inherited an explosive atmosphere that came in through the water course. And when the agitators mixed up the water, the explosive atmosphere then was released, and industrial switching gave rise to incentive sparking. So we run the water module as well to help the utility companies, where people have got different types of hazards than you would find in a normal explosive atmosphere condition. The regulator approached us in 2010 and said that some of the biggest risks that we're finding in the North Sea were loss of containment brought about by poor mechanical standards. So we were asked to develop a mechanical module, which of course we did. We've got a working party together, which is our methodology, and we brought in some chief engineers from a refinery to run it past them. We courted the Muir's Machinery Committee to ensure that it was meeting the user's requirements, and from 2011 till now we've been running the mechanical module. I think we have 9 centres in the UK and 4 internationals centres that deliver the mechanical competency validation. I touched on earlier why we introduced the application design engineer module, and this is a set aside in terms of how we assess competency. This is more of a desktop application competency than a practical rig competency, like some of the slides I will show you later. So that this allows the application design engineer to test his ability to select the right equipment for the approved zones that has already been decided by the area classification team. An EX14 responsible duty holder module, that will be a commercial product from next month, and I'll give you a little bit more of an explanation of that later. Perhaps the biggest difference with CompEx is that candidates are practically assessed by a series of competency validation tests and are individually examined with regard to their knowledge for core competency certification purposes. And I could perhaps give you the best analogy for that is the driving test, where the driving instructor prepares you to drive the car, but it's the driving examiner on behalf of the vehicle licensing authority who provides you with a certificate to say that you've got a competence to drive. And that competence isn't a total competence. That's probably more of a core competence, which is exactly what CompEx is built on. Anybody who's passed the CompEx scheme, it doesn't mean automatically they've got the ability to go and take charge of the inspection of a refinery. They are at a level decided by industry that means they will not give rise to danger, but their competency develops from that point onwards as they specialise in whatever line of work they do in the explosive atmosphere. We always say, please ask to see the worker's CompEx certificate to check which modules they have passed. Certainly where you are involving contractors, which has in the past also been seen as an area where there's been a level of weakness, because it's not just the employees that need to be competent. You are equally at risk with any subcontractors that you place your own contracts with for maintenance and inspection. So in order to receive a CompEx certificate of core competency, candidate must pass an entry eligibility criteria for both a written examination and a practical assessment. And for a full CompEx certificate, they need to have some kind of craftsman certificate to prove an apprenticeship, or to have an employer's supporting letter to say that they have been working at that level in industry for a number of years. The knowledge evidence is an online exam these days. I've got a written test there, but it's actually everything is done as an online exam these days, which for us is a much more secure methodology of measuring candidates' knowledge. It's not at the risk of anybody marking a paper. We've taken out that risk and it's now totally electronic. And this year, the assessment will move over to an electronic record, whereas currently the assessor sends us a number of sheets of special candidate validation test papers. We'll provide that on an iPad moving forward this year, which will speed up certification also. So CompEx is much more than just a training course with a certificate of attendance. The candidate's underpinning knowledge and practical ability is developed and assessed to determine their core competency to work safely in explosive atmospheres. I talked about the length of time the scheme has been running, and to give you some flavour, the EX12 application design engineer been running for a few years now. We've done over 500 candidates through that professional engineer model. The mechanical, nearly 1,800 in 5 short years. That's had a remarkable growth for us. Fuel running steady, same numbers of candidates every year really, nearly 800. But the majority of what we do is EX1 to 4 for gas and vapours. Nearly 54,000 in 20 years since September 2014. I'll show you some slides of how we developed the American module at the end. But over in America, our colleagues work with the National Electrical Code 505 for class and zone, which is pretty much 95% the same as IEC 679 parts 14 and 17. But they also work with NEC 500 code, which is class and division, which is very much like my former life in British Coal, where it was either flameproof or it was intrinsically safe. And the different protection concepts we enjoy today with EXD and EXE, etc., just certainly weren't around, and they don't exist with NEC 500, which is what the large majority of onshore installations are in the US. And we developed that module with BP America to address their requirements in the Gulf of Mexico, where they saw some areas where they needed to see competency validation, and we've done nearly 50 there in what has only been about 1.5 years, mainly BP employees or service companies. So a new module that the HSE have asked us to develop, what they found is that a number of not high tier and not low tier coma sites, but sites slightly smaller, but equally have to manage their installations in the same way under the same regulations and the same standards, a weak link in the chain. People don't understand their legal responsibilities. This has filled the missing piece in the jigsaw for us. We had the designer, we had the technician, the operative, but the responsible person has never been something that we've covered in CompEx, and this year we've completed that route, so that we now have a competency validation for somebody who needs to understand their legal duties, but not only their legal duties, how they manage an installation in terms of an initial inspection, how they manage the installation and manage and inspect the asset moving forward, so that it is managed in the format required by legislation. And to give you some understanding of what we cover in the module, there's a general understanding of the relevant electrical engineering and principles, explosion protection principles and techniques, and how we do that. The understanding and ability to read and assess engineering drawings, because the EX14 responsible person might not always be technically qualified, but they might be the responsible person as a duty holder. So they need to have a working knowledge of the relevant standards. So the 679 parts 10 for area classification purposes, you need to understand the concept of that and how it's done. Installation for 679.14, inspection for 79.17, and also an element of 19 for repairs. They need to have a basic knowledge of quality assurance, including the principles of auditing, documentation, traceability and measurement, and instrument calibration, which is very important in terms of process control. So the course objective is to ensure the responsible person has a necessary toolkit to resolve, influence and prioritize management issues in the real world, because this is what happens, to manage change. So if there is no asset register, you need to have one. If you manage change and have a new installation, you need to add that to your asset register to ensure it's got the opportunity for inspection schedules. You need to understand hazardous area classification, how you manage inspections. It's all very well having a subcontractor come in and inspect the site and give you a list of 200 defects. What do you do with it? So next time they come and inspect and you get another 200 defects, if you've not done anything with the previous 200, you've now got 400. And this is real live problems that are being faced today. So how do you manage the type of inspection? How do you manage the grades of inspection? And how do you manage the frequency of inspection? Perhaps more importantly, how do you manage remedial repairs? How do you manage the defects? How do you manage the downtime? And how do you manage the resources with the employees and the subcontractors when you get the window of opportunity to do these defects. How do you manage that? And this is part and parcel of the responsibilities of a responsible person. We've run a first pilot course. This is how a working group for CompEx will operate. We'll design a course, we'll have industry view into the working group, and then we invite industry representatives from the user group to attend the first pilot course, which we conducted in late October. And one of the user representatives on that course went away on the Friday and said, there's certain things I need to do when I get back to work. And he thanked us for reminding him of some of the responsibilities and highlighting some of the things to him that can get lost in the busyness of work life. So we've then put our centre instructors at the different licence centres that are going to deliver EX14 through the course in November, and again a couple of weeks ago, and we will have this licensed and available through some centres in England initially from next month. Where do we operate now? Well, if you start up at the top in Aberdeen and work your way clockwise down the UK, we've got Aberdeen and Falkirk. We have 5 in the northeast of England and 4 in the Yorkshire and Humberside region, down to Great Yarmouth area, Lowestoft, and then to the north bank of the Thames in Basildon. Southampton on the south coast, and Yeovil, where they do a number of modules, including fuel. And then work your way up South Wales, Neath and Pembrokeshire, up to my neck of the woods, Chester, Wrexham and Ellesmere Port and Manchester, which forms the 27 centres that we've got in the UK. But internationally, and this has been one of our biggest challenges, is delivering CompEx internationally. We've 3 centres that deliver the IEC modules in Houston, and one of those centres delivers the NEC 505 code as well. In Holland, we have 2 centres in Zwolle and Huis. Poland, there's a mobile centre that goes in from Holland into Poland. We have a new centre in Norway last year with Xtech. Baku in Azerbaijan, and a trio in Kazakhstan, where there is vast oil reserves, and they're really getting on board with competency validation now. Doha in Qatar, that centre's been there 8 years. The Emirates in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, certainly they're picking up with the major oil and gas companies, ADNOC and Gasco, etc. That they're very interested in CompEx. In Oman, and recently in Shell's Manjun oil field compound in Iraq, we have a CompEx centre which the Dutch company has put in. We have a mobile unit that goes around North Africa and around southern Italy. 2 centres in Nigeria and another one on its way. Sasolburg in South Africa. 3 centres now in Singapore, 1 in the Philippines, and 1 right amongst it in South Korea between Daewoo, Samsung and Hyundai shipyards, where all the gas platforms and oil production platforms are made these days and then shipped out to various parts of the world. And Cork in Ireland. Last year we licensed Jones Engineering Services in Cork. I was down there this morning with some Japanese visitors who've also shown an interest in CompEx, showing them around the Cork Centre, and we're very proud of that centre. Since it was licensed in June last year, they're now running courses every other week, and they've done nearly 100 candidates since it was licensed in midsummer last year. So congratulations there. And I think, Jim, that's where we first met up. So that's why I'm here tonight. So thanks for that invitation. So other international centres that are currently in development, we have a local national in Nigeria that's developing a centre in Lagos. We have a company in India that's in partnership with a company in Singapore that will deliver us a centre in Mumbai to assist our Indian colleagues. We have a centre going in Indonesia, Petrotechno, and that will be licensed within the next few months. We have a centre in very early stages in Jordan, And also we just licensed a centre now in Myanmar, previously Burma, where they have got requirements for competency. So the world is growing in terms of its understanding of competency. And to give you a visual understanding of where we are, the circles are where we have interest. The black spots are where we have licensed centres. So you can see from that we're getting pretty much a comprehensive world coverage with where we have CompEx centres now. And if I was to share with you my strategy that we've got 24 centres in the UK after 20 years, then if I can get 24 in each of those countries over the next 20 years, I can retire then. I'll be in my late 70s then, that'll be fine. But we've also, because we've got developing countries wanting competency, it's important that they don't all just speak one language, they don't all just speak English. And the standards are generally in English and only just recently been translated into other languages. So we've been delivering CompEx in Dutch for the last 6 years, and we have the examination in Dutch as well. We developed a French examination when we did some CompEx in Algeria with BP. We developed a Norwegian examination to help our colleagues over in Norway. We've just developed a Polish paper. We've had an Azeri and Russian paper around for a number of years now. We've just updated the Russian paper to the new standard, and we have currently translating Spanish and Portuguese. Now that is a challenge, gentlemen. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but with some professional help from our centres, we do get there. So they'll deliver the course in their own language, and the practical assessment is pretty much in an international language, because equipment marking is done in hexadecimal type legends. So that's an international marking for equipment. But the theory examination of the standards, we do that in their own tongue, so that they've got every opportunity to understand how it actually works in the mother tongue. That's something that sets us aside from other courses that are run on an international level that will only do it in the English language. Certainly brought some challenges to the table, challenges that we've risen to, and rather than refuse those challenges, we've embraced them to help us take CompEx into those countries. So just to remind you, this is my last slide before I show you some pictures of centres. What CompEx is about ensuring safer working in explosive atmospheres through a proven approach to competency development and certification. And I will take some questions after, but I'll give you a quick overview. To give you some understanding what we do with CompEx centres, this was the opening of the NEC 505 centre in Houston, in Texas, at the end of November in 2013. And you have the representatives from the local company ATEC on either side of the picture. That's my colleague, hoping that I'm not going to cut the ribbon with those cable croppers. It did take 2 goes to do it. The British consulate representative is the head of BP, Bob Foy, Shahid Jamil, who is his deputy at BP, Tommy Sutherland, who's the chief executive of ATEC. So this was a big step forward for us in America. And to show you this is the ATEC centre, and this is the practical assessment bay, where we validate the competency of the candidate's practical ability in terms of installation and inspection. So each candidate has one of those modules to themselves. So it's quite a high capital intensive installation, but ultimately what you get out of it is someone who has achieved a benchmark for working safely in explosive atmospheres. So that was just to give you a flavour of some of the centres and practical examples. So thank you for being so attentive. I'll certainly be happy to take any questions from you now.
You mentioned EP there as part of something from US base. Is that in relation to the condo that they're trying to improve their standards? Obviously, they shouldn't have had hydrocarbons come to surface, but obviously something ignited it when it did. Is that something they're trying to improve on, or is it just no reason?
No, they didn't have in place anything for competency validation for 505. They had things in place for IC 679, and we didn't have anything in place. And they saw us as an opportunity to put something in place for them. But it wasn't the only reason, but certainly we went and asked if there was any way we could help. And as part of the discussions, the development of 505 came out because they did a risk assessment and said, yes, we'd like to do NEC 505 in the Gulf for the platforms that are in the Gulf of Mexico. We've already got the IC platforms covered, and we've identified this as a. So yes, it came about that way, and they're very proactive with us in terms of their improvement program, definitely.
All right, Martin, just to reiterate or put in context, greater context, the whole issue. The driving force of this, outside of the Piper Alpha incident, which was the practical sort of driving force, but the context of the EU directives in Europe, and there is an obligation on companies, on countries to the EU directives are supposed to implement standards, which puts an obligation on companies to ensure that in hazardous areas, and not just the explosive areas, but this pertains to explosive, but in general in hazardous areas, that the people working there are competent.
Yes.
And but I'm trying to make the point and asking the question at the same time, because it does strike me, and we've had a conversation about this before, and with Ken Lynch, to whom I met you. Industry doesn't seem to be aware that there is this legal obligation there. And I mean, the course and what you set up is providing one route through which people can be deemed to be competent.
The big question is, if anybody has an incident and the warrant card lands on the desk from the regulator, there's a long time that passes then for them to realise what their legal obligations need to be. And the ATEX directive demands that there's a safe workplace for all workers. And it also demands that the people that are asked to do a job are competent to do that job. And this is a methodology of demonstrating, and it is a defence for employers, that you have done your best efforts to ensure that the people that you are utilising to protect your asset are competent to do so. And it is a valid defence. It's been used as a defence in the past, and it'll be used as a defence and the regulator in the UK accepts this as a methodology. It doesn't accept a certificate that says I've been on a training course and sat there for a few days and got a ticket at the end of it. They don't accept that. Categorically, that is not a competency. There's no equivalent for competency unless they've actually demonstrated their ability, which is what a competency validation is. And that's not scaremongering, but this is what happens. And for us, we're taking on a responsibility as a certification body as well, to ensure that the people that go through our centres, and we have to ensure the management and quality management, that there's no variability through the centres. And just to take that a little bit further, in some of the areas of the world where we go into now, the success, everybody asks me about the success rates of candidates. So before you do, I'll tell you, it's infinitely variable throughout the world. It depends on their level of entry and their level of understanding on where they're coming in. But I can guarantee to you that the benchmark that we assess against is the same worldwide. So if they're miles off, they'll badly fail. But we don't make any allowances for any areas of the world. So if they have a CompEx certificate, it is met a worldwide standard in line with our accreditation to 17024, which I passionately defend, I might add, as you probably gathered. Yes.
Martin, I found your talk very interesting, particularly the direct line to the individual. And I was just wondering why you chose that route rather than, say, accrediting a process, namely an organisation, and leave it to the individuals within the organisation then to accredit the operatives. It struck me that the seemed to be a gap, like you leap from past the senior management in the company to the operative. Like, does that put you exempt those people from their?
No, was that the safety linkage that you were the link, the safety chain diagram that I put up? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, you're trying. If you accredited me, you're trying to count for me, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If I make a mistake and
well, you're carrying the can for your mistake. We're saying we validated you at a point in time.
Yeah,
that's important.
I'm working as an employee in a company now, and my line manager, is he out of the equation if I blow the whole place up? And he's
no, not at all. No, he's not. But regulations these days place a responsibility on both the employer and the employee.
Yeah, and he demonstrates that he's discharging his responsibility by engaging you in your role to do this function.
Yes. Well, yes, exactly. That's exactly right. But when CompEx was developed, they saw the biggest risk as being the practitioner, the guy on the tools, and that's why it was addressed at that level at that time. And what's been identified since is that there's a requirement back up the line management chain as well to ensure that that competency is right. And what I didn't touch on is, I normally mention this, practitioners got very confident, and especially these day and age with social media, there's a lot going on, people talking to each other, so that the level of knowledge of the practitioner has really risen. They'll quite happily challenge a hookup drawing these days and say, that's not right. That type of equipment shouldn't be in this zone. That would never have happened 25 years ago. Because the level of knowledge wasn't there. And everybody took as read that the hookup drawing couldn't possibly be wrong. It was done by a professional. Now, that's not always been the case. And that's why we provided a competency validation for application design engineers, because those professional engineers who are doing their job very well will have no problem with that. But it does allow them to demonstrate that they've got something to provide evidence that they're competent as well. Otherwise, everybody's reaching for a degree. And is that a competency validation, or is that a level of academic knowledge? That's actually what it is, isn't it? That's the problem. There's no methodology to demonstrate your competency if you've become an application design engineer through the ranks. That's what we provided.
On a case where if you go out and audit an individual and we say he has a lanyard which he didn't purchase, or he's not charged with having a mechanical test done on it every 6 months, who do you hold responsible if his certification is out of date, if he's using a mobile innovation work platform which isn't certified?
But that's part of the management quality control of that site, in terms of looking after the equipment.
Yeah.
That's part of that quality management process, isn't it? So it's
you include that in your
no,
individual?
No, because what we've covered as part of the individual is the ability to prepare and install EX equipment from both a heavy duty type of equipment for EXD, EXE, and then intrinsically safe equipment as well. So that's 2 practical assessments for 2 installations, and then conversely the inspection of exactly the same equipment and the inspection of intrinsically safe equipment. That's the 4 modules. So it's all to do with the installation and inspection of electrical protection concept equipment, and not everything else associated with it.
Yeah.
It's pretty much. They argued in the 1990s that they wanted a 4-week course. An industry through our company said, forget it, and they were looking for total competency that may well have included some of the things you've identified there. But for total competency, that's not even guaranteed after 4 weeks. So they took out everything that was desirable and left everything in that was then a core competency, so that candidate, if they got everything right, they are aware of what gives rise to danger, and they know exactly how to get things right to prevent it giving rise to danger. And that's the benchmark that we set then, and that's the benchmark we've still got. But total competency then comes with experience and time and ultimately supervisory position, and then they begin the competency development of people that have come in again. That's how it works in practice.
Yeah, I mean, just couldn't it be, I mean, an analogy came into my head. It's like a taxi company. I mean, a taxi company, you wouldn't give a taxi company the responsibility to certify that their drivers can drive. They get a driving license, but the fact that they've got a driving license doesn't put any responsibility on the driving license certifying organisation that they won't have an accident, or that if they're given a bad car, they won't have a crash. And that's why I think it's just that, well, you know, you've got an independent assessment of their ability to drive a car. And so I see the reasoning of having independently and putting the onus on the individual. The individual is competent. So in the taxi case, the individual is competent to drive a car. Theoretically, they've got their license
Against an agreed benchmark of tests that they pass during the driving examination. That means they meet a determined level, which is revised from time to time. But that's the level they've reached, and that's the same analogy that we use. That's as close as we can get to the analogy.
Yeah.
Do you see it remaining confined to the explosive atmosphere, or would you see any expansion into areas? Many private contractors now are starting to work on the medium voltage electricity system, which has many organisations like the Health Executive or the water boards, you know, have quite a substantial amount of medium voltage, high voltage electrical plant, and they have contractors. They're going out to tender for works, and that they don't really have a handle on an objective measure of the competencies of their contractors. Do you see that becoming an area? Historically, the electricity companies had contracting organisations, and they did a lot of that work for these types of
in-house.
That day is sort of
the day of developing it all and training it all in-house is certainly moved away from us, hasn't it, in terms of overheads and people slimming workforces. It's happening now with the reduction of the price of oil, where there has been large-scale redundancies in major oil and gas operators, and with that comes a warning sign for me. When does it go too far? You know, we're not in control of the price of oil. We're only in control of how we maintain a safe workplace. But ultimately, how much does that cost? And that will obviously be part of the decisions that are made with the major oil and gas companies currently, with the challenges, the financial challenges they face. Perhaps what we're looking at is the challenge that creates to us in how can we help, you know, reduce the costs in terms of making sure they're still using competent people to carry out. Whether that spreads into other industries, perhaps it was the disaster that sparked us into life in terms of this in the explosive atmosphere industries.
yes.
But general health and safety regulations makes that requirement about competency across all sectors and all disciplines. And we've provided a methodology in explosive atmospheres. Whether there's a requirement specifically in the industry or not, I personally would say that there is a requirement, because we understand the ramifications if incompetent people are let loose on medium voltage substations and installations, and when it goes wrong, and the catastrophe and the potential for danger and fire and explosion that can occur even on medium voltage systems. So it's risk assessment, and it's the risk assessment on the subcontractor, and it's all about what's written in the tender to place the contract with somebody, and whether or not competency is in the subcontract, in which case then the responsibility is on the tender company, whether they provide the right people. And if they're not, well, it's already in the contract that they should do. So I think that's perhaps where CompEx has grown from, is the major oil and gas users deciding that they only want core competent people to work on their installations. So you can't get in certain refineries, you can't leave the helipad in the North Sea without a CompEx certificate, because of the history and depth and strength that the scheme has developed over the years, with industries feeding. So it's become a mature scheme now. But competency is in a lot of regulations, in a lot of sectors, and there's a lot of people got their head buried well in the ground about it. and it's only when there's a problem does it rise its head up. And if people haven't got these things in place, then there's legal issues these days, corporate manslaughter issues these days as well, that are there for the owners of the companies, which they cannot ignore. So they must have these things in place to protect themselves. But also, if you've got them in place, you're protecting the asset, you're protecting the individuals that work at that asset, and that's both the employees and the contractors alike. They're all humans, and that's what's important. That's what the European ATEX directive is looking to do, to make the workplace a safer place for all to work in.
Another question there for you. Just you mentioned there are 100 people certified in Cork, and that must be great news there to see that the awareness is there and it's growing within Ireland. Do you have any sense maybe of the breakdown of the attendees and the background of their industries?
I was only talking to the director there this morning about this, and they come across from all industries now. Contractors in both. It's not just oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
It's chemical industry as well. This is relevant to chemical industries, and they're looking to do dust and mechanical within and develop that within this next 9 to 12 months to because there's a demand there. At the moment, he's not advertising the course and he's full till June. That's the effect it's had in Cork, in terms of people realising their responsibilities, and people they don't have to fly across to the UK. You know, it's a local operation, but equally he shared with us that it's across a wide spectrum of industry of people that are going on the course now. So people from ESB have been on the course, and other, but much other companies, even their competitors who need CompEx electricians, are putting them through the centre, because the centres has instructors and assessors that come over from the UK at the moment. So there's no conflict of interest there. So it's all done professionally, impartially. So there's no opportunity for conflict there either. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.